You did warn me that you were
No,
into chair dancing.
Here we are.
So here we are. I am so excited to have you here on my show, Richard Moore. Why don't you introduce yourself and let's dive into what we were talking about just now in the green room.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm Richard Moore. I help people convert and sell their propositions, and much of the time that's through LinkedIn. And I've been doing that for 7 years now. Prior to that was through Facebook. And so I really enjoy helping people who have a talent or some great service who aren't getting the kind of the traction they need with conversion, and teaching them the nuance of communication. So the little intricacies that help them to make sure they're not irritating someone and get that opposing person to say something like, do you know what? Yes, I'd quite like to have a call and discuss, how you might be able to help. So it's just really fulfilling to do that. And before all of that, 2014, I left the city after 10 years in corporate selling. So it's nice to have done half of that and half of this with my career. And I definitely prefer this part of it for sure.
It's much more fun. And what's incredible is we were in the green room, as we like to call it, on the B2B Live Lounge. And we have known each other on LinkedIn for the whole of those 7 years that you have been active on LinkedIn. And we've never actually spoken in person or met.
No. It must be like you or I are actively avoiding one another and just we're not admitting it. Yeah, it's 7 years. It's unbelievable. I think that happens a lot, and it's because the networking thing on LinkedIn is an interesting one. In days of yore, what would happen is you meet someone, then you have this awkward looking at your foot, kind of shuffling around, trying to find something to say. But nowadays you kind of connect and you watch each other's shows and you get to know one another, but it's kind of like in passing, in comments and that. And actually we really know people really well. And then you meet them and it's kind of nice, isn't it? Because it's like, I feel like we both knew we were going to get along because we've got this background. So it's kind of the reverse way that humans used to connect and network, but it works really well for me. I do love that the awkwardness is dispensed with because we kind of have a sense of each other already.
Absolutely. I feel that I know you. And when you highlighted the fact that we'd never actually met, I was surprised because I feel like I know you anyway.
Yes.
And I feel like I have met you. And that to me is the beauty of LinkedIn, and particularly the beauty of being live on LinkedIn or video on LinkedIn. And I really noticed this after lockdown, when obviously the only way that we could communicate was online, and particularly on LinkedIn, when LinkedIn transformed into much more like what it is today from this sort of horrible, stiff, ugly space. But I was going to live events after lockdown, and people who I'd met on LinkedIn and connected with on LinkedIn during, those sort of 2 years or year and a half, whatever, would say, wow, you're just the same as you are on LinkedIn. I feel like I know you. And my first reaction would be, why would you be anything different?
I know. No one has the energy to be a completely different person online as well, or hopefully they shouldn't. I totally agree. I think it's just nice as well when you meet people the first time, but you do know of one another. It's really lovely that there's now hugs rather than like shaking hands and stuff. And it's just such a warmer way of doing things. So we've come a long way. Like 2018, content on LinkedIn looked very different. It was like, here's our white paper. I mean, I think it was the end of 2017 they allowed videos. So that's when it first started. But we didn't have live back then. We didn't have all the wonderful things we've had since as well. So it's changed so much for sure.
Oh, it really has. And I remember doing a poll, and one day I will dig back and find it. And I think it was 2018. And the question was, and it was a legitimate question at the time, and it was quite controversial. The question was, are emojis appropriate on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Because nobody was really using them. And then I saw one person used an emoji and I thought, ooh,
It was scandalous. It was absolutely scandalous. Exactly. And it was meant to be like, if you're not wearing a tie, then what you're doing, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's nice that we've all relaxed a little bit more. And there are still some people who think that, you know, that's just not how it should be. But those dinosaurs won't be around for long.
Exactly, because we need to communicate. We need to talk to each other. And this is the great platform to do it.
But I think what's come out of that is, and just simply through the volume of people who have expressed themselves in their ways, what's become very clear is that you have different ways of communicating for different types of people. And of course, emojis are inappropriate for some areas, but not for others. And, you know, there's some people I work with who are incredibly extroverted, and that is so on point for them to use emojis because it resonates so well with the people they're targeting. And so it's never going to be, is it right or wrong for LinkedIn? It's, is it right or wrong for the tribe you're targeting? So I love that nuance has come through, but that could only happen because there's been so many people taking part in content. It really did feel like a small group of us to start with, didn't it?
Oh, it really did. Nobody else was doing it. And yeah, and it's just changed so much, you know, over time. And what I love is, and I had a conversation with my 6-week program just before coming on here, and we were talking about content, what sort of stuff to post about, and how personal should we get? You know, what should I talk about? And does it always have to relate back to work? And I always say it's up to you. You know, draw your line wherever you want to draw it. You know, you can be as personal as you like, really. And, you know, if you want to talk about your cats and your whatever, then talk about those things. It's up to you and your brand. And if that's you, then that's you. If it's not you, then it's not you.
I think that needs to be married with consideration of who your ideal buyers would want you to be as well. That doesn't mean being someone different, but it means giving them the bits of you that would make them go, yes, that is the person I want to work with. Because even if, I mean, for some, they're quite happy to share every little thing about themselves. And that then they almost in the same breath complain that high value customers, premium decision makers aren't so interesting. And it might be that is a consideration there. It doesn't mean that the higher you go, the less you should share. It's always specific to the person that you're trying to target. And it's a case of what kind of values are we going to share? What kind of person do we want to show them that we are? But also recognizing that the kind of person we share from ourselves attracts a certain type of person as well. And, you know, I'm kind of serious. I'm not really funny. And like, yeah, everyone always laughs when I say that, Sarah. I'm not funny.
No, your content is pretty serious and it's very focused on what you do.
I like staying in lane. I am at my happiest when I'm talking about work. I really am. And what's interesting is that there's a set of people out there who are like, thank you. Finally, someone who's just focused on getting on with it. But then there's another set of people out there who are like, gosh, you're dull. And so they go elsewhere. And it's absolutely fine because, you know, we can't appease everyone.
We can't. And I find, you know, if I post, so last week, I posted a photograph of my feet. Okay. I was able to put my socks on after my surgery. I did have my socks on. Okay. And honestly, that post went crazy. So many people engaged with it and asked me questions and congratulated me on the fact that I was now able to put my socks on. And why did I wear black socks? Surely I wore purple or orange socks. All of this kind of stuff. So got loads of engagement. And then I post how to do something on LinkedIn. And it's like just a few people going, okay. But if all I posted about was personal stuff, then nobody would know what I was doing. And so
exactly. I think that's it. And I think you've got to weave it in. What makes sense is like if you consider the outcome we're here for, we are all, with the exception of very few people, here for the outcome of client acquisition. So we need to map to that. Therefore, we should mostly stay in lane. And if we want to share things of our world, well, then weave it in to the lesson, you know, and then that makes a lot of sense. I think is it's interesting as well because it helps with the whole trust thing. You mentioned live streaming earlier, and whilst we can write great posts that might land really well, it's a great display of what it would be like to interact with you when you've got a live stream or a video. A live stream I love, and I miss dearly the audio rooms because I think that was really about like the nuance and being aware of the other person, and I loved how we could bring the audience up and so on. But what's really great about live is it's like you can rehearse a bit if you must, but you certainly can't, you know, go back and do it again. So I quite like that it's just, this is how I am, you know.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm loving this conversation. So I'm just going to quickly look. So we've had quite a lot of people commenting in here, which is brilliant. So Lauren Rosario, hello and welcome. It's true you can connect so deeply via LinkedIn. Yes, 100% we can.
Yes.
Which is the wonderful thing about LinkedIn, and you can really find amazing people. And we wouldn't know each other, Richard, would we, if it hadn't been for LinkedIn? There's no way.
But what I like is the facilities it gives you to do this. So it's always saying here, I don't want to just evangelize about LinkedIn, but like what's really good is it says like, here are some people like this one that you might want to check out. And little things like the average user doesn't muck around writing comments on posts. They look and then they're gone. And so we can see who's looked at our profile, for instance, and that starts great things as well. But what's critical about this depth of interaction is those connections are things you can carry with you. And if you are to launch a new service, for instance, those people are around you and interested in you, and they kind of stand up for you. And I wanted to make this point really clear yesterday. So I deliberately did a post in the evening. That some people here may or may not have seen. I wrote the number 4 and then hit post. That's it.
Oh, I didn't see that. No, I didn't.
To make a point. The point I was making was there's a lot of chat about, well, you must lay out your wording perfectly, and you must have the perfect hook, and you must have perfect, you know, structure. Otherwise, no one will read your post. And my point in doing this was I literally wrote one singular digit and pressed post. I didn't do anything else. And it got thousands of views. It got like scores of people writing comments and things because I have a network that I've interacted with. And my point I wrote up about like what happened at my post this morning. I was like, here's what happened in that post last night. So it's been a fun experiment to do. The point I made this morning was, meanwhile, out there, you've got incredible talent, like deep, rich experience. And they're writing a post or a piece of content for LinkedIn about this wonderful thing they can share, and it's crickets, and no one pays any attention.
Yeah.
And it proves the point perfectly. It is not, as much as is being peddled, the layout or of the post or the template or the perfectly worked hook, because if you've got people who you've interacted with who are fond of you, stimulated by you or inspired by you, they'll show up for you, even if you just post the number 4.
Absolutely wonderful. And Lauren Rosario has said it really is a community, which is so true. And Kieran Bailey saying, I spend my time in leaderships talking about the positive impact of vulnerability. So I feel comfortable to share here. And there's another comment. This was the one I was looking for. I recall speaking at your event in Nottingham, Richard. I met 3 people and I speak to them on LinkedIn to this day. And that's what I find just wonderful about LinkedIn, is that you can build relationships in real life. You can meet people in real life who you would forget about completely. Because you're not going to put them on your email list and start emailing and going, oh, hello, how are you on this Tuesday?
Yeah, exactly.
Just not going to do that. But you can keep in touch on LinkedIn and keep that relationship going. And you were talking about trust. And by keeping that relationship going and by popping up in their feed, they're popping up in your feed, that trust starts to build and grow and grow and grow. So when they're ready to buy your service, you're going to be the one. It's you.
Yeah. And if you look at buyer psychology, so no deal ever happens without trust. So you're absolutely right that it's needed. But if you look at the seed of trust is familiarity. And a great way to prove this is if you, for instance, think about a celebrity that you've never met. You might, for instance, I would trust Taylor Swift more than someone who I've never met, who I've never seen before. I've never met Taylor Swift. She might be crazy. But the point is, like, I've seen a lot, so I probably would trust her more. We probably would trust each other to a degree more than someone we've never met, like in virtual sense, because we've seen each other a lot. So that's why, that's, you know, a really great reason why we need to be present. And that means like a fair amount of frequency in the posting, but also showing up for those people. I have a little, like, you know, you can't remember all the people, so I have like a list of favorites and things like that, so I can keep remembering people like who are stimulating me. Oh, check out what they've said today, or so on. But I just think it's really important to just keep your hand in, because otherwise you fall off the radar. That's the thing. But familiarity is what creates the trust. And you're quite right. When they feel like there's been enough touch points and that trust is strong enough and they need you, you can't miss them, because the sales calls are so straightforward because they're already kind of pre-sold somewhat.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love this. So continue. I've just pressed a button and you've disappeared from me, but there you go. So yes. So absolutely. And it is about building trust. And just by popping up in people's feeds, that trust starts to build, and people do feel like they know you. It's know, like, and trust. We know that journey, and we know that it actually does work, which is brilliant. But talking about sales, which is something you talk about a lot, and we know that the word sell is quite a dirty word. You know, people don't like it. They think it's an icky thing. And I talk about selling a lot, and how LinkedIn, there is a way of selling that we call social selling. But you talk about selling a lot. So why do you think it is a dirty word?
So if you look at, so the reason why is simple. Firstly, let's be clear. So sales is a whole spectrum. People are like, I hate sales. And when someone wants to come and buy their product, suddenly they bloody love sales. And so there's a whole spectrum. Sometimes it's attraction. And the other end of the spectrum is chasing and being really annoying. So it's like there's a whole spectrum. And the point I'm making is that there's many different styles of selling, and the most prevalent is the one that the majority of people do, which is the masses who don't, or who aren't well trained in sales, have a very accessible approach, which is, I'll just ask someone to buy my thing. Or their evolution on that is, I'll ask someone who looks relevant to buy my thing. And so it's called spamming, and that happens the most. And so people don't like sales. They think it's a dirty word because that's what people think sales is, because that's the thing that's done the most commonly. Right at the other end of it, you've got this very small minority of people who've trained lots and got a lot of experience, and they do it with a lot more elegance. People love them because they really help buyers buy. And so it's purely because the average person approaching someone else doesn't do a good job. And so it's annoying. And if we want to break down why that is, it's really simple. It's because most people try to sell the way that they want to sell, which is, I want to tell you to buy my thing or ask you to buy my thing, and I want you just to say yes, please. Yeah. What we need to do instead is we need to sell the way that they would want to buy. Because when we sell the way that they want to buy, firstly, it's like so irritating for people when they hear that, because they're like, oh, but that's going to take ages because I have to like nurture them. And it's like, yes, sorry. But the point is, if you do it that way, it actually doesn't take longer, because you're not spamming all day long and getting nowhere. It's fulfilling for both parties, and you get the outcome you want. Plus they spend more. They don't want discounts. They are thrilled to buy from you. So, you know, helping them buy is about, and this is crucial on LinkedIn, it's understanding the state that the buyer is in when you meet them. So I always say, like, meet them where they are, you know. And so when we say on a post, or like on a featured link on our profile, jump on a call with me, it's like, obviously they're not going to, because they're not going to go from that state of a cool passive audience member to, hyper white hot wanting a call with you, that's too much of a leap. Which is why we have things like lead magnets or gentle nurture in the DMs. It is critical. And so meeting them where they are is like, here's some really stimulating tactical value in the form of a post that you can go use. And then they come back because that was really helpful and it worked. Or you gave them a bit of homework or an assignment, or you gave them like a little thing they could do. And it makes them click around and makes them go and see the next thing you might offer. And it warms them. I think if people can recognize it's a bit more like a conveyor belt, and you put these people on the conveyor belt and you warm them over time, and eventually some of them start jumping at you, that's the way to look at it. You can do cold outreach, but I did it for a decade and I taught teams to do it. It is an art. It is an absolute art and science, but it's an absolute art. And if you can't do that, you're going to be desperately upset with yourself because you'll be miserable spamming out messages all day long. So meeting them where they are and sell the way they want to buy, as Kim's rightly summarized here, is really crucial.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. Yes, Kim has said, sell the way that people want to buy. And in fact, the more that you're on LinkedIn, engaging with your audience and reading the comments that they do put in, the better you get to know your audience and what it is that they want. So over the years, I've honed my content and changed my posts in order to match what the responses that I'm getting. And what I've discovered is that certain posts, certain photographs of me, usually me pulling a silly face, is the sort of photograph that gets better engagement.
Right.
It's crazy. And in fact, I had a client recently, a big client who I was working with as a consultant for quite a long time. And he said to me, the reason I chose you over other LinkedIn trainers that I was looking at was because he said, your content is sometimes not what you might call camera ready.
Brutal.
Which was quite brutal. But basically, I'm being myself. I'm not, putting on an act. I'm not being all corporate-y and whatever. I am myself. So, and it's like we were saying, you get what you see.
Yeah.
So people are looking, thinking, I know that if I work with this person, this is who I'm going to work with. This is how they're going to behave. This is the language they use. This is the approach that they have. I make a big deal about LinkedIn being fun. It doesn't have to be boring. You can still learn tons, but we can also enjoy the process. And I'm not saying laughing about, messing about, but we can just enjoy the process. Yeah. And the people who want that approach come to me because they know that that's what they get.
But if you can imagine any scenario when you're in business, or even if you're in corporate work at the highest level, you're still having some fun along the way. If you enjoy interacting with that person, you do have fun along the way. And so it's really important to just add that. It's kind of like really good lubrication for the post, isn't it? As opposed to just purely the details. But, each to their own. Because if someone's listening to this is like, that's just not my thing. Do I need to find a way to be funny? No, you don't. You've got to remember why people are looking at content. Most people looking at content are looking at it for a break. They want a break. Yeah. If you discount the content creator lot who are there for commenting, but you're there for a break, and it's to be therefore stimulated in some way, either perhaps humor and entertainment or information. And if you can be useful, then that's great. One thing you made a really good point about, though, which I want to pick up on, is how it's important to spend time with these people so that you can have a sense of what matters to them. And I think that a real blind spot, I talk about this a lot actually, is a real blind spot is that we assume too much often. And what I specifically mean is we assume they know their problems and the solution they're after far too much, and they often don't. The average person who could ultimately buy our service in our audiences looking at our content tends to be experiencing symptoms of a problem that they have. If we talk about their problems all the time, that can assume too much. And I gave an example a while back, so I'll use this again because I think it's a good one. If I've got like a wheezy chest and a cough, they are symptoms perhaps of bronchitis, but I don't know I've got bronchitis till I go see an expert or a doctor. I certainly don't know what the solution is. So when we meet, so how do we use this? If we're writing a post, we should be meeting them where they are in the form of showing awareness that we get the symptoms that they're experiencing, and that manifests as an inner dialogue. So the things they're saying to themselves, oh, I hate it when this thing happens, or it's so annoying or frustrating when this thing happens. Those things aren't the problem, because that's too far down the stretch. What we need to be doing is saying, I see you, I get you. And then the audience will be like, yes, that's exactly how I feel right now. And then we've got them, then we can take them and nurture them through, well, here's what those symptoms represent as a problem, and I can provide the solution. I just think that's missed a lot. It's such a nuance. People assume that like everyone's like buyer ready, and they're just not quite there.
Oh, that's just brilliant. I love that. And I see that all the time in my world. You know, people will come to me and they say, oh, I'm just, in fact, somebody today commented on my post and she said that LinkedIn is a horrible place, full of spammy comments and, you know, whatever. And I replied to her and I said, you can change that. You can change what you see in your feed. You can change your experience on LinkedIn by how you behave on LinkedIn and who you're connected to and what you're saying. But her symptom, if you like, is that she's seeing really unpleasant stuff in her feed. And the solution to her problem is it's quite complicated and complex, as you know, but there are things that she can do. And when people come to me and say, oh, I'm not getting any interaction on my posts, or I've been on LinkedIn for years and I've never had one inquiry, then it's up to me then to look at their profile, look at their activity, and then work out, okay, what can we do to fix this? But you're absolutely right. I love the way that you talked about symptoms, because the symptom is what they come to you with, not
absolutely
the problem. Yeah,
absolutely
brilliant.
right. It really matters. And I think we've just got to spend time with people, and we need, when someone says something that reflects on their frustration, we should be writing that down. And the other tip just to add on this is, it doesn't half land well when you write a post that has these symptoms as quotes. And the reason why I think that's a good idea is, if we as specialists at understanding our space, or as experts in our space, spend enough time with something, we're really good at explaining or describing a situation they're in or a symptom really eloquently, because we practiced it and we understand it. But it's better to use their choice of vernacular. Like, the wording they use is often clunky and like they're stumbling over themselves trying to explain how they feel. It's just like this, like, I feel like this. That is exactly how we should be explaining it. Yeah. Because what that does is it meets them where they are. They're not experts. And we've got to stop writing like that. And therein is actually I believe the most common pitfall for producing content is those making content often are writing for their peers, or at least to be understood by their peers. Yeah, a perfect example, because it's kind of related to our world in LinkedIn, is there's an incredible amount of talk of people who help with personal branding, and they want to help, in the main, someone who is not in the business of personal branding, because otherwise they'd be doing it themselves. So, for instance, a managing director of a 6 million quid company that does cybersecurity, and their posts talk about, like, constantly selling the importance of working on your personal brand. Meanwhile, the managing director's like, what the hell's personal brand? And like, why am I couldn't be less interested. So just, there's a perfect example. If you're selling personal branding services to people who do not do personal branding, stop talking about personal branding, because you need to use their language. And I know it's not as exciting and as glamorous, but you need to be using words like visibility or being seen by the right people, not personal branding, because otherwise it would be like you trying to sell people on LinkedIn and then sell them on your services as well. It's like, why are you trying to convert us on personal branding when personal branding is your tool or solution to get the outcome that they need? No one cares about personal branding who buys that service. What they care about is being seen by the right people. Personal branding is simply your device to help get them there. You can tell I've made this point several times before.
You have, I can tell you have. And it's really funny because several years ago, I was invited to give a talk at a finance conference. And they got me in to talk about LinkedIn. And I thought, yeah, this is great. I'm going to talk about creating each of these people as influencers and creating their own personal brand within their space. And I'm going to make myself sound really clever.
Yes.
I thought. Okay. So I prepared everything and I thought this is going to go down so well. This is going to be brilliant because these people are really clever. I mean, these are people who are high up in finance. And I was a little bit scared of them, to be fair. So I thought I'd be really clever and use this kind of language and that they would really embrace it. Of course, it scared the living daylights out of them. And the minute I started, I could see them all sitting there thinking, I don't want to be an influencer. I just want people to understand what I do. So I realized about 10 minutes in that this was just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, guys, I'm going to do something here. I fessed up. And
really good for you.
And I said, do you know what? I'm going to turn off the slides and I'm going to do my usual talk about how to get visibility on LinkedIn, etc., etc. And they all went, oh, thank goodness for that.
You can feel it in the room. Oh, well done for changing direction. You had to do it. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I was actually had it been, online, I may not have felt that. I may not have understood.
No, absolutely.
Not my audience, but boy, I really got that wrong. But yeah, I was able to flip it around. And I completely agree. Using words like influencer. I mean, the word influencer has got really bad rap over the years, of course, as we know from Instagram, etc. So using that word, I see that word used occasionally and I think, no.
There's another, that's the thing. Right. It's like what words resonate with them. And I know people who love being an influencer. They love that word too. Yeah. But then there's other people who just simply don't, or thought leader. For some, it's like that's like we've hit, like it's so cringy. But then other people are like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. And so I just think we need to it's so hard when we're desperately keen on our own language, but we have to make sure we're using the language of the buyer. Otherwise, we're missing them, just missing the point altogether. I'm so glad you changed direction. I
know, I just had to. And then, in fact, I got a really big client on the back of that, and I thought, well, that would never have happened if I didn't.
No, of course. Well, that's your awareness for sure. Absolutely.
I mean, they would have just walked out the room, quite frankly. There was, it was that kind of a place. It's like, I don't like this. I'm not wasting my time listening to you. Luckily, that didn't happen. So I'm really aware of the time, and we have actually already gone over. But one of the things that you talk about a lot is asking questions and listening to those answers. And I think that's what this is about, isn't it?
It's about saying to yourself, how are they answering the question? Because that's really useful. Just because we think we know the answer, they're going to probably give us anyway. That's nice, but what matters is we experience this kind of process of them buying with them at where they are, and it's really important to do it that way. So asking questions should be all over our process. So, for instance, if we are going to interact with someone in a direct message, you should acknowledge what they've said, but then you should ask a question because that moves it to the next stage. If you're going to send someone a message, so you're the one sending the first one, you should acknowledge a thing in front of you, whatever your mutual commonality is, and then you should ask a question. It's just really simple. There's a couple of quick, easy tips. One is if you're stuck.
Hang on, I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm going to ask you my last question that I always ask, because you can put this in. So, because we are over time, which is just 35 minutes, I want to give, you were about to give a tip. I would like 3 tips from you, Richard Moore, 3 tips that all of the people who are here watching and anybody who's listening later when it becomes a podcast can take away from you today. 3 tips from Richard Moore. Are you all listening, folks? They're going to be amazing.
So tip number 1, I'll expand from what I was going to say. So tip number 1 is, if you're in messages with someone, if you're in the DMs, if they give you an answer you don't understand or an answer you can't do much with, then you just ask them to elaborate. It plays on this psychology that people don't like to be misunderstood. So no matter how specific and detailed they are, no matter how much of an essay they write, if you say, could you just elaborate a bit more, or what exactly do you mean, they will now give you more. And that's super useful if you're a bit stuck. Just bounce a question over to them. The second thing is, always put your content through a filter of, am I being seen by the right people in the right way? This is kind of a two-parter, but am I being seen by the right people in the right way? So the right people comes from you adding them and networking and connecting in the right way to those right people. But are you saying stuff that's going to make the right people say to themselves, that's the kind of person I would spend money with? It's so crucial. Final tip. I'm loving this one. I've been saying this a lot recently. So final tip is this. Make sure you decide whether or not you are here to create content, or if you're a content creator. I run a business that requires or needs, as do you, it requires me to make content, to create content. It's part of its marketing. I am not a content creator. Content creators make it their job to make content all the time. They grind comments on LinkedIn. They spend the whole day on here, constantly trying to get people around them. And that's wonderful, as long as they're happy and fulfilled. But ask yourself, am I a content creator, or am I here to create content? Because for many, it's a very seductive path, and you can feel yourself sliding into it. And before you realize it, you're meant to be running a business, but you're now becoming a content creator. Creating content is different to being a content creator. We urge people to have that conversation with themselves.
That's incredible. I've never heard that before. And
I'm right, by the way. I'm right.
Of course you are. Of course you are. Because you're on the B2B Live Lounge. And I only get people who know what they're talking about on here. So very quickly, if you're not a content creator and you are creating content for marketing purposes, then don't get, well, I think what you're saying, and maybe I'm going to ask you to elaborate on this.
Right.
Tip 1. I think what you're saying is, don't spend ages and ages and ages making it look a certain way or doing this or doing that, but just get the message out. Is that right? Partly.
Here's how I put it. Your actions in creating content should map, if you're creating content, your actions in creating content should map to the outcome of acquiring customers. Your outcomes tend to be, if you are a content creator, they map to this kind of outcome of optimization to get as much distribution, likes, and reach as possible. So when you hear people talking about, oh, if you do this, you'll get more reach. So I'll leave this with, this is the perfect way to put it, as an example that's been floating around recently, which is, at the end of posts, don't write, comment this to get this from me. Now, look, you've possibly seen this a lot of time. People saying, don't write, comment this and you get this. And I had a discussion about this with my group in the accelerator last night. And basically what's being said by content creators there is, that's not fashionable anymore. It's so Instagram, it's cringe, don't do it. Meanwhile, if you do it, you may not be as fashionable. It might be not what a content creator would prescribe, but you're getting leads. And so you need to take the hit sometimes And for instance, it's no longer a case that we have, you know, if you put a link in your post, it no longer affects the reach, but it used to. But when it used to affect the reach, so it's like with polls, like, well, don't do polls, like everyone does polls, right? But you can get leads from them. Yeah, but it's like they've been done to death, right? So don't do things that only map to the maximization of reach and likes, unless that is your job and you're paid to do it, as in you're a content creator. But everyone else, get leads and close deals. There's no nobility in not doing it.
Exactly. So Kim is a content creator. Kim works with me. And so, yes, it's important. But I completely agree. And in fact, when I post content that maybe gets, so I was talking earlier about personal posts about my feet, got loads of engagement, but how to do something on LinkedIn, which is the next post, got, you know, a fraction of that engagement. Which one is going to get me an inquiry? The second post about LinkedIn. And brilliant what you said about links. I love that, because if you want somebody to click on a link, put that link in your post, because otherwise, how else are they going to find it?
And in the past, people would say, oh, but the algorithm, it's like, who cares? So you lose 30 likes out of 100, or so you lose 3 likes out of 20. Who cares? It doesn't matter. And I think the way to look at content, if you put it all together, is exactly that. It's not a single piece of content. It's an open-ended thing. It's an organism that stretches out forever. You and I have been doing this 7 odd years or 8 years. And it's like, it doesn't matter if or 10 years. It doesn't matter if the post bombs, because you got another one the next day and then another one. It's like, it's all part of content. It's not a post on its own. So it just doesn't matter. And
you've got to try. You've got to try different things. And I was just saying to my group earlier that now is the time to try new things and to try different things while you've got a small audience, and you can have a play around, see what you feel comfortable with, and then just get out there and do it.
But all I would say, always be willing to sacrifice a piece of content in the name of experimentation, because you never know. You may think you're optimal for what your outcome is, but you might be able to do something slightly better if only you'll try. So just because someone says, oh, it doesn't work, or it doesn't work for me, or like, don't try that, doesn't mean it doesn't work for you. So do try different things.
Absolutely. Always try different things. Oh my gosh, we could go on forever. We are way over time, but hey, this has been absolutely fascinating and brilliant. And I have loved having you here, Richard, in the B2B Live Lounge. It's been an amazing conversation. The comments have just gone crazy. I'm going to respond to them all afterwards. But Richard Moore, thank you so much for being in the Live Lounge and sharing your amazing intel. Presumably, we can find you on LinkedIn. That's the place where you are.
I'm not on there, actually. No. Yeah, you can. So it's, what they're weird, aren't they? It's linkedin.com/in/Richard James Moore, all one word. Or just find me on this post, I'm sure, for this live stream. But it's just so nice to be on here. And finally, we got together. So thank you, Sarah.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Richard. Oh, hang on. Wait a minute. We've got to play out some music. Well, if I can find it. I was too busy chatting.
Thank you.